All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's a little bit after 1 o'clock. This is the Gordon Plaza Task Force. We are here for an additional update. What we usually do is before we get to the official part of our agenda, we usually have an opening statement from the members of Gordon Plaza, the residents of Gordon Plaza. And I believe Ms. Ludwina Hurst is going to lead that part of our agenda today.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Thank you. Actually, I do not have an opening statement. I just have 4 items that we want to discuss today.
Great.
We want to focus on the updates and the next steps. And that is number 1, the appraisal process for distribution of funds. Number 2, community needs to resolve all concerns most immediately. Third, the next steps that honor our demand to assess full funds to move into healthy homes of our choice. And 4, establish the next Garden Plaza Task Force meeting to keep this. So we as a board and community at large have questions for each to move this forward. And at this time, the board and the residents of Garden Plaza has agreed to ask Angela Kinlaw to come up with those questions that we have for everyone. Thank you.
Ms. Kinlaw, do you want Mr. Thorns first to present, or do you want to ask the questions first? Like, how do we want to kind of move this along? Do you want to ask questions after he presents? Or?
No, we just want to keep going. Okay. We want to just name that the ultimate goal of today is to continue moving this process forward. And in the last meeting, there were 4 outcomes of this meeting, and we actually believe that the meeting could have gone actually faster than it went if we could just stick to the 4 things and keep moving. Anytime the residents of Gordon Plaza come forward and they are uprising as they are justifiably in the right place to do, it's because they are met with antagonism and they are met with deception, and there's no need for that. So we want to keep moving the process forward. And so we just want to know, we thank you, CLO Montano, for being here. And we also thank you for communicating when you cannot be here. That's one of the things that the residents have asked for when this journey started, that people would operate in the name of communication and transparency. And that has not always happened in this space. So if we can start the meeting by agreeing that our goal is to move this forward, then I believe that this meeting could be as seamless as possible. It'll be up to the people in the room. So with that being said, I'm glad we have members of the administration who are here. Mr. Montano, we just want to start with you. This is going to be a yes or no answer. And if the answer is yes, we can move to item number 2, 3, and 4. We understand that an appraisal was done. We thank Mr. Thorne for meeting the deadline that was established in the last meeting. He's one of the few people who has met a deadline in these meetings, so we thank you for that. With the understanding in the last meeting, and I know that you were not present for that meeting, in that meeting, the reason that this one appraisal was done was because the community wanted to have the opportunity to have open transparency about the methodology that was being used. There had been a 10-month-long debate about this methodology, only for Mr. Thorne and the replacement cost analysis team to meet and realize that they could actually do the things that have been talked about all this time. So I'm not going to say that that was a waste of time, but it was a waste of the residents' time. So with that being said, we understand now that an appraisal has been done. Marshall and Swift was exercised in some way as it relates to that particular methodology. The main point coming out of that was that we needed that transparency to be there for the community to feel a sense of peace about what is to happen next going forward. So what was proposed, and I just want to say this because you were not there and I don't want anything to get lost in the sauce, is that the understanding was that Mr. Thorne had the authority, and he confirmed it in the meeting, that he had the authority to utilize a sample to move this process forward. That he did not necessarily, particularly at this point, need to go to people's homes, go into people's homes. There's a COVID protocol, and President Moreno asked the question, can you do these appraisals without coming to the properties? His answer was yes. So we only have a basic question for item number 1 today. Is it, with the understanding that we brought this up last time, and understanding that Mr. Thorne can use that sample appraisal to move this process forward, because we see no reason why any other member of the community would receive an offer less than the offer that would come to Ms. Sheena with her basic sample property.
Can you state as your question is whatever appraisal Mr. Thorns provides going to be the same for every house?
The sample, because we understand that the same for every house based on that sample is feasible and possible if there's a decision for it to be so. And it would save people a lot of time. It would save a lot of energy from the community, because we have constantly said, we don't want delays, but we don't want people to be haphazard with their lives. And that's going to prolong the process even more.
Oh, Madam President, members of the community, I don't know if I'm qualified to answer that question, to be honest with you. I mean, I don't think I can give you a yes or no. I mean,
Okay.
practically, I don't know. There seems to be, I don't believe every home is this equivalent throughout this neighborhood. I'd almost have to defer to Mr. Thorns to see if that application is probable for each and every one of the homes moving forward. It may be, or may not be. I don't know. I'd have to defer to him for that information, because I don't have that answer, or nor am I qualified to really give that.
We would welcome that response from Mr. Thorne, fully understanding that the private law firm that you all hired indicated that he could use a sample. So I'm just going to defer to him, because for us, it's as simple as a yes or no. And if it's a yes, we can keep moving forward, and it's actually a good, positive thing for everyone. There's no debate about that.
Mr. Thorne? Could you answer her question?
What's that question?
What was
I'd like
the
to hear-
answer?
May I ask if we could have?
Wait,
Mr.
well, I didn't hear
Thorne's-
Mr. Thorne. What was the question?
Can you
The
use the sample?
question,
And have the same value for every house based on the one appraisal? I don't think that you could possibly say yes.
well,
We asked for an appraisal to be done so that we could get an
Hang on.
idea of the methodology.
I think
What is
that,
you-
I'll just pause for a second, because our objective today is not to be antagonistic like the city has been with the residents. But we get antagonistic when we feel that that's happening. So if CAO Montano doesn't feel that he is qualified to answer that question, then I don't think nobody else needs to either. We're going to turn it to, and if it cannot be answered now, then so be it. But that is what we brought up in the last meeting. And that is what would help to move this process forward even more seamlessly. Because when the board was brought into a meeting with all of the people who were listed out, who were in that meeting with the mayor, numbers were thrown out for everybody. Now we have an actual appraisal on paper, on record, and we don't understand why there would be a need for anything else, especially considering the fact that these appraisals are very subjective anyway. And we appreciate the qualifications and the professionalism that's been provided by Mr. Thorne for meeting that deadline, which is why we're coming in with a very simple question to be answered.
So there were a lot of things said, and you asked me to answer a specific question. So which specific question do you want me to answer? That's the question.
So the question is, as named in the last meeting, can we move forward? And this is why I'm directing it to the administration, because it's really going to be your determination as the administration, whether or not the appraisal that has been done can serve as a sample to save everybody else time, because we understand that people do not need to do more than that sample if you so choose.
The answer to that question is no. The appraisal process requires me to do an interior inspection on all the properties. There are occasions where I cannot, when it's not possible for me to do that, I can move around that process. However, I would not like to, because I have no idea what I'm looking at from the outside only. So they're collaborating processes which I can use in case where I have information about the interior of the property that I may believe is reliable. I could use that. A conversation with the owner of the property with some information, I could use some of that. But the city is buying the property, so the city expects from me to do an appraisal, and to do an appraisal on a residential property, I should have the opportunity to do an interior inspection. And then at the same time, then it doesn't leave any subjectivity about that. It's objective. I walk in, I see, I write.
I have a question. For this sample appraisal, did you go into the property?
No, I did not.
Okay, so, but you were able to do this appraisal?
I spoke to the visited with the owner of the property. I have seen the interior of that property some years ago, so I know what's in there as it is now. I don't know the condition of the property in the interior, but I asked her questions regarding that, and she told me.
But you were able to do, hang on. But you were able to do the appraisal without having to go into the property, and you came out with these numbers based on what you knew about the square footage, what you knew about particular components of the home, but you did not go into the property, and you were able to come up with this appraisal.
And my interview with the owner of the property, who was there when I went there, yes.
And you did an interview.
Yes,
Got
I
it.
did.
So can you do that for the rest of the properties?
Well, I can. However, I would rather not, but I can. And I said I can. The risk is that I don't know what I don't know. And if the expectation is that I just simply drive around, look at the house, take some photographs of the exterior of the house and write a report, and that's it, then that's one thing. If the expectation is that I can arrive at the property, I can measure the property if I need to, I can speak with the owner of the property and interview them, that's another thing. My druthers is I would rather walk through the house.
We understand. We understand that there are preferences in the process. And one of the reasons we continue to talk about and focus on non-devaluation and non-discriminatory practices is because discriminatory practices come up when the subjectivity is allowed to reign supreme. So I just want to go on record as saying we are not here today to scrutinize the expertise of Mr. Thorne. We are here today to move this forward. And Machina took it upon her right, as the rest of the residents have indicated, that as much as the society would like to have us believe COVID is over, it is not. And we understand that there is a COVID protocol that can be honored to allow Mr. Thorne not to have to come into anyone's property. And we appreciate Mr. Thorne honoring that request from the sample property of Machina, which is why he did not come in, and the appraisal has been complete. We would like to move this process forward.
Can I say one thing, Angela, please?
Yes, please.
I just want to say, Mr. Thorne's, our conversation before we actually scheduled that appointment, we talked about, because that was my concern about COVID, and just help me understand, maybe I'm taking it the wrong way, but you told me if my house was the size of their homes, you wouldn't even need to go inside. But you told me that because my house was much bigger, that you needed to go inside. But you did work with me and you said, you know, because of your concerns, I can go around that. But now it seems you're saying you would need to go in their homes.
Now, what I said was, just as I told you, I would rather go into the house. And the reason I did not go into your house is because you told me you were concerned about COVID. And I honored that request. But I did meet with you. We walked around the house. I took the photograph and you pointed out to me the things that and answered the questions that I asked you. And at no time did I say to anyone, though, that any property that I appraise becomes the bellwether for all properties. In other words, I'm not able to say appraise this and so all the rest of them have the same value. It doesn't work that way. And you wouldn't want that to happen if you were buying a house that somebody did an appraisal across town that they would use for your house. The idea is to be certain about as accurate as you can. Subjectivity comes from the unknown. When I don't know, when I don't see, then it becomes subjective. Objectivity is when I actually see and observe and take notations about those things. So I honor your request because you did, and that's what I'm supposed to do. And I did it, and I returned the appraisal report to the city. And thank you for your cooperation.
Yeah, and we want to honor that. We understand that that's not Mr. Thorne's decision to make in isolation. We understand that he's meeting the request of the residents, and the residents are asking for this process to move forward. And it didn't have to happen for Machina's residents, so it need not happen for the others. We'd like to move this process forward.
So I think the question, Mr. Thorns, is can you begin to move this process forward by doing the appraisals of the other properties similar to what you just did with the other property and not have to go in and start moving that along?
If I'm told that they don't want me to do an interior inspection of the property and they're ready for an appraisal, I can do that. I will do that.
And I want to go on record as saying the residents are not saying that today. They're inquiring because based on the outcome of the response, that helps them to make their determination if they want to move forward or not. And the reason that it was recommended to be a sample and the reason that Ms. Sheena volunteered such is because the residents are in a fight for their lives collectively in the face of a city who does not want to honor or acknowledge the land, but sold them land that's on a hazardous waste landfill. Now, that's not Mr. Thorne's job to resolve that. But what we do understand is when we're applying methodologies to situations where there is an opportunity to move this forward in a way that honors the lives of the residents, there's nothing about that process that would counter the law. And there's nothing about that practice that would counter even the advice that's been provided openly in this space by the private attorneys that you all hired. So we understand that it may not be a preference, but the desire is not about preference. It's about what we know can be done. And we'd like to move this process forward. I can go on to number 2 while we think about this a little bit more, or you all can provide an answer, but the request from the residents is not going to change.
Why don't we try number 2?
Okay, so with that being said, we fully understand that an appraisal was done. We also understand that when appraisals are done, it does not necessarily mean that the appraisal has to dictate what the offer is. We all know that, so we're not going to debate about that today. We also understand that when the appraisal was shared with the Gordon Plaza Task Force, for some reason, even though members of the task force had received it, Ms. Sheena had not received the appraisal at the exact same time, which is a little concerning. We're not going to debate about that here today. Ms. Sheena received the appraisal last night prior to us coming in here today. And we understand that the appraisal, I believe, was done on like the 13th. Mr. Thorne was working it out to try to meet the expectation of the deadline. We're so appreciative, Mr. Thorne. Today is the 21st. Ms. Sheena received that by mail on the 20th, of course, the night before this meeting. In that document, it indicated this is the appraisal and simultaneously, this is the offer as well. And you have a 30-day window to decide if you're going to accept it or not. Very antagonistic.
Yes.
So Mr. Thorne, I'm not putting that on you. And I'm not even going to put that on the people in the room because I'm not sure which ones of you knew it or not. Does not matter. It happened. But this is how the city of New Orleans gets represented. And this is how people's lives get impacted. And Ms. Sheena can choose to or choose not to accept that offer. But we are here again because we aim to move this process forward. And you can see if you just meditate for 30 seconds, how much confusion that will cause not only within the community, but within the city, because we ain't having it either. So with that being said, because there is a timeline, we come before you, council, because we understand that no matter what comes out of the appraisal, no matter what comes out of the offer, the fact that that letter was provided in the envelope that went to Ms. Sheena, but was not provided to you all when it came over electronically. What that means is that there's a press to make a decision in 30 days. Now, let me be very clear, be patient with me. The residents have been the ones saying this entire time that they want to accelerate the process. They haven't been trying to slow down the process. So the 30-day window is whatever that was supposed to be about. But they do understand that there's an entire process that people have to go through contending with where they're going to move, even if they accept an offer. And because that offer was provided, there was no acknowledgement in any way, shape, or form. I'm not even going to talk about the appraisal. I'm talking about the moving cost that has been a part of this conversation the entire way. So if the city of New Orleans was going to provide an offer for the home, and I'm using that word very technically, there was nothing within that envelope that gave the community any sense of peace, because separate from this appraisal process, everybody knows, the law knows, Chair Garner knows, everybody knows that there was supposed to be an offer made in terms of the relocation costs. Everybody knows that. If they don't know nothing else, people gotta pay for moving. So with that being said, we come to the council because we know that at the end result of generating this, that's still going to be an issue. And we find that at the end of the day, we know that there can be resolved. So we want to thank the entire council. We want to thank President Moreno. We want to thank JP Morrell. We want to thank all of the members of the council, because in the last council meeting, on page 51 of the agenda, item number 48, it indicated that there was an opportunity to establish a Gordon Plaza Environmental Equity Relocation Assistance Fund. We're gonna need that fund because people have to pay for relocation expenses. And we need that to be worked out, because if people have to make a choice about accepting an offer in a 30-day window, which is not a requirement that they accept one way or another, but if that's the kind of antagonistic pressure that the city of New Orleans aims to put on people, this has to be contended with, and we would like the council to take action on it. We understand that you have to take action on council meeting dates, and so something is going to have to give on the relocation costs, which do not require an appraisal. It just requires people to care enough about their citizens to ensure that when they are being relocated, or in many cases displaced from their community, that they need to be compensated, to include the renters. So we're coming before you with that. And the reason we're coming today is because we don't want to wait until a council meeting to huff and puff everybody up and be like, we need it. We're telling you now that there's no way that people can conceptually, logically move under these conditions, knowing that that has not been attended to, even if they were to accept the offer today.
So a couple of things. One, I believe that's Councilmember Morell's legislation. Happy to meet with him and talk with him on that. I also want to meet with, I've also had initial conversation with Ms. Godshall about that as well. So I can commit to you to yes, to work on that particular piece.
Thank you for that
Yes.
commitment. We can also commit to sharing with you information that maybe hasn't even made it your way, because information's been shared with not only the council, but the administration, and there's been full-blown justification for every line item in those relocation costs. And we understand that the private law firm that you all have hired has supported moving costs. So that hasn't been an argument with them. As a matter of fact, those moving costs have been under the category of relocation costs. So it's all in alignment.
The other thing too, that I think would be helpful to us is if someone could send us a copy of the letter
Mhm.
that shows, the 30-day timeline. I just haven't seen any of
Yes.
that. I'd like to read.
We barely
over
saw it
some of those
ourselves. We barely
provisions.
saw it ourselves before this meeting. Okay, so item number 3 is a simple one. We would like to give proactive notice to the administration, to the members of the council, to people connected with Bayou Title, connected with Liberty Bank, that the residents of Gordon Plaza have had havoc wreaked on their lives for the last 41 years. I said I would get up here and make it through without getting teary-eyed. But the problem is, even after all this, for whatever reason, people cannot find it in themselves And we understand because you're operating based on your interests. And a lot of times your interests are not the people of this city. So with that being said, we are determined that people take these next steps proactively with the goal to not undermine, dismiss, disrespect, or further perpetuate environmental racism through these steps going forward. Because the rest of these steps going forward could be so seamless for everybody involved. But the only reason the residents have to rise up, justifiably so, is because they are constantly met with antagonism. The city of New Orleans, Gilbert Montano, this is advice for the future, hoping nobody else has to go through what the residents of Gordon Plaza go through, is once again, the attorneys that were hired for this, even if attorneys were needed, and we question that, they could have been transactional attorneys. These are litigators who are going above and beyond to make the residents' lives as taxing as possible, and you all are gonna feel the backlash every single time. So we would like everybody to be on notice that the expectation is that you are going to treat the residents of Gordon Plaza with dignity and respect. You've dragged them through the mud. And they are deserving of that, if nothing else. So when we say we'd like this process to move forward, we come here because we want it to move forward, and we do not want additional burden to be on them mentally, emotionally, or physically. That's the only reason I'm up here talking, because I do not want the residents to have to go through this toil again when the next generation is looking at them like, you treat them like that? I know you don't give a fuck about us. We know you don't. So with that being said, that's item number 3, that's done. And item number 4 is we would like to go to the calendar and establish the next Gordon Plaza Task Force meeting, because the residents still have some questions. So they're not here to say any offers being accepted or not being accepted, because look, there's a 30-day window out there. You don't have to say anything today, apparently. So with that being said, if there are any questions that they have, they will go forward and have a third-party appraiser who is licensed in the state of Louisiana review the appraisal, not for another appraisal per se, but to review it to answer. This process could be so much more seamless if the city of New Orleans would just decide to utilize the sample, which is more than fair to the residents, because everybody want to talk about fair and how big a property is and how little a property is. Nobody thought anything about fair when they sold the residents houses on toxic soil. Nobody thought about anything about fair, talking about fair market value and fair. Nobody thought about being fair when they charged the residents not only for the house, but a separate charge for the land, the toxic land that has still not been acknowledged. So with that being said, we don't want to take up any more of your time today and ask questions that don't need to be entertained today, because we're not trying to be here all day. We would just like to continue to move this forward. And I want to say thank you again, Mr. Thorne, because I know you in just the middle of some stuff, but that's how it goes when you're smoothing with the city of New Orleans. We just would like to thank you for meeting the expectation and the deadline on time. And we would like to move this process forward as seamlessly as possible. So can we look at our calendars for the next date, please?
Yeah,
Are we suggesting that we're not going to hear from Mr. Thorne on the appraisal?
What was
That's
the
the purpose of today's meeting.
What was the appraisal about? I'm curious.
It's the purpose of today's meeting, to hear from Mr. Thorne with regards to an appraisal and his methodology.
Do you really want to open it up? Because if you do, we're ready for it.
Yes, I would like to hear from Mr. Thorne.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much.
Then
Mr.
you will
Thorne,
hear from me again as
Mr.
well. Go
Thorne,
ahead.
I'm not surprised. I would like to hear from you, Mr.
Very
Thorne.
good.
Thank
I
you.
sarcastic.
Very good.
That is
Mr.
very sarcastic.
Mr.
Thorne,
Madam, I guess my specific question,
Hang on, everybody, hang on. I know that obviously the Gordon Plaza residents, myself, city attorney, many of us have seen the appraisal. And we've had, maybe conversations, like I've talked to Ms. Godshaw, but I think for the CAO's purposes, I think that he would like to have some more information about the appraisal. And I think that that's a worthwhile question for him to ask. So
Yeah.
please, Mr. Thorns, don't put your stuff away. Please answer the CAO's questions, because the more information that he has, the better we can all move this process forward.
And if I can just
Thank you, Madam
add, if
Chair.
I can just add, we're happy that this part is happening because notice, we did not request it. And I would hope that somebody has briefed you before you open this up,
Madam,
because we're happy
Madam-
for it to be opened up.
Madam Chair, I know this has been significantly an interaction with the law department. And so the edification of, I guess I'm most curious about the amount. I was slightly briefed prior to this meeting,
Okay.
but nowhere in depth. And how you based and derived the hours that we've spent here were about what would be the sample size, understanding that you couldn't use obviously Gordon Plaza as a sample size, and how that connects with what the proposal is. And is that based per house? Is that based on square footage? And really if even the law department would highlight the 30-day piece, I just have not been completely in the weeds of the details, simply because this has been more of a legal discussion that has worked around. So any edification would be helpful. Thank you.
And we're going to put the appraisal up on the big screen. I don't know a better word to call it, up on the big screen, so that we can all kind of.
And if I may
follow
say this
along
really
with it.
quickly, this is why I want to go on record as saying that the city of New Orleans wants to open this up, so we're fine with it. But I want to just name that this appraisal has information in it that is very personal
Yes.
to Ms. Sheena. So we are here for transparency. We are the ones here for transparency, but there's some documentation in there we're not even certain should be in there.
Right.
So if you project upon the screen her personal documents, I want to go on record as saying she never gave permission for those documents to be included. She gave permission for the appraisal to be discussed and or shared. The appraisal was discussed, but there's information in there in the back that is personal to her. And I just want to
Yeah,
name
we don't have to
that.
put it up on the screen then. That's not a problem.
But in all honesty, now that it's in a government.
It is a public
it's
record.
Public record.
Yeah, no,
for
that's no
anybody to have.
problem. We're saying to you that
You're
there's
saying that you
information
all
that
are
normally
being,
doesn't show up in an appraisal. So if you want to go there, we can go there.
and you're also saying that you all have been fully transparent in the process. I understand that as well.
If we don't have a problem with you going, if you want to go there.
Well,
Okay,
Go ahead, Mr. Thorne.
yeah, I'm confused about the personal information that's in the appraisal report that should not be in there. And I'd like to know what that is, because I certainly don't want to intrude on anybody's personal affairs. What's in the appraisal report is standard information. I don't know what else, what I could have left out or what shouldn't be in there.
Mr. Thorne, we'll have to defer to your knowledge and understanding. If you're not giving social security numbers, if you're not giving birth dates, if you're not giving height, weight, personal information, what you're giving is numbers that are now already public. So I would like to hear your appraisal.
Go
Well,
ahead.
For the record, I can tell you what's in there
Mr. Thorne, I'm very familiar with an appraisal. You would not have personal information. We know the name, we know the address, we know comparable properties. What we don't know is things like race, gender. I mean, we'll know it from the name, but there's not personal information that can't be shared because it's already shared. We were asked to come here together today to review an appraisal, and I would appreciate the opportunity to hear from you.
Yes, go for it. We're not stopping you.
Okay, so you want me to explain
The appraisal
the appraisal.
and the amount arrived at and how
Okay.
it was arrived at.
So let's start with the bigger picture first, because that's the most important thing. The neighborhood of Gordon Plaza,
Yes, it's a public document.
the neighborhood of Gordon Plaza has gone through a number of years and has been declared by lots of folks, including the EPA, as being an environmental damaged neighborhood. And in addition to that, because of all of the discussions in and around that, there has been significant stigma which is associated with that. And those are two separate things. The environmental issue is one that does not go away. The stigma issue does not go away. It could have a shorter life than the environmental damage. However, that would only be if the environmental damages were mitigated and removed to the point where there would be no environmental issues at all, and then the stigma would go away. So we got those two things to deal with. So the rules that are published through the Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal requires that we do what's known as a determination of impaired and unimpaired. And so the neighborhood in my assessment is impaired, meaning that it is not a neighborhood that is viable for the acquisition and exchange of real estate at arm's length. And that is basically this determined because it is unlikely that lenders would loan any money to anyone having an environmentally impacted property in that particular neighborhood if they knew that it had those issues. And so in order to appraise that kind of property, you have to make a decision. So the decision is the question is what? The answer to the question of what is that it's a single family residence. The next question is what does that consist of? And that is the size of the property, the living area, and the amenities. If it has a garage, or if it has a patio, or other things that go with that real estate. And that is not the same for all properties in the neighborhood. It's not you would think it's not, every house does not have a garage, and every house does not have a patio. Every house does not have certain things. So they are all different in some form or the shape or the other. All of them are not the same size. Some of them have been increased in size, the living area, by the fact that they've closed in the garage. Some of the garage that have been closed in have been done at absolutely great lengths to make sure that it fits right into the property, and others may not have, but you won't know that until you see it. And so once you have those factors involved, you have to then deal with the issue of where. So unimpaired would be a neighborhood or neighborhoods that would not be, that would be outside of where the subject property is. And for that, I've looked at neighborhoods throughout the city for lots of different reasons. And I've looked at the activity. And the profile of those neighborhoods are really important to the appraiser, meaning that we have similar houses, ages, conditions, that we have similar access to public services such as buses and shopping centers and churches and go and on, that neighborhoods would normally be looking for, schools for their children. All of those things have been filtered through this process as I went through it. So in this appraisal that I did, and one that you're going to be seeing here on the thing, the unimpaired neighborhood chosen for this were neighborhoods in Gentilly Woods and Pontchartrain Park. And those neighborhoods are within a mile and a half of the subject. You can walk there, as a matter of fact. They are unimpaired, meaning that they have no restrictions in terms of people buying and selling. People buy and sell in those neighborhoods all the time. In fact, there has been tremendous tear downs and rebuilds, meaning that we call them infills, where people have bought a lot and they've built new houses, or contractors have bought lots and they've built new houses on those lots. And there's quite a few of them. And I've looked at all of them. I've driven through there and looked at the houses that are been built. And in most cases, I've used them for this appraisal, some of them. After that, then the quantity and the quality of what I'm appraising comes into the process. And what's there now is you take a look at the photograph. I don't want to operate that thing. That's on you. First, let's go to the first page where the photograph is. Okay, first page on the appraisal is what's called the cover sheet. And there's a photograph of the house, which I took from the street. And there's some other information on there regarding where it was located at and for whom the owner, it says borrow, because this is standard forms that you can't change a lot of the verbiage in, but it's actually the owner, where it says borrow, that's the owner of the property. And it has a date, and that's the date that I actually physically went out to the property and looked at the property and made my determination about where the appraisal process would start at. On that date, I saw it on that particular date. And of course, the bottom of it is my name, second page. Next is a letter of transmittal. The letter of transmittal simply transfers to whomever the appraisal is being directed toward, the address of the property and the value of which I have concluded. And I've signed the report. Next page. Next page is a sheet that talks about, it gives you a simple profile of the neighborhood. It gives you some information about what's in that particular neighborhood. And it gives you a grid which identifies that there are, on this particular grid, there's a subject property and 3 comparable properties. And on those comparable properties, you will see that by their addresses where they're located at. And of course, you look at the adjustments that I made on those properties to try to equalize them to the quantity of property that I have, and for the subject to equalize it on the basis of the condition of the property. On the subject property, it does have some deferred maintenance for the roof, particular that I could see. And that's what's basically noted in that appraisal report. Then the adjustments, after the adjustments are made, I conclude with a value. Keep going, next page.
Mr. Thorne, can you come closer to the mic?
Okay, on the next page, there is a certification page of which I certified that I had followed the rules that are required of me through the Uniform Standards of Professional Practice and also the rules of the state of Louisiana and the Appraisal Board. Next page. Then there is an addendum that I added into the appraisal. And this is a standard addendum that I've added, and it's going to be in most appraisals. And what it does is it gives you a brief legal description, talks about the lot and the square number that is involved. The next item is to talk about extraordinary assumptions and hypothetical conditions. Now, these are the 2 things that tie this appraisal into the requirements of appraising property that is affected by environmental conditions. I have to make a decision about what's extraordinary and what's hypothetical. In this case, the extraordinary situation is that here's a property that is built on top of a landfill and has been certified or has been indicated as an environmental issue. And so that is included in the appraisal report. Hypothetical conditions, there were none except the fact that I use my comparables from an unimpaired neighborhood. Unimpaired. That would be in the case, if you were going to buy a house today, you would want to go into an area that did not have environmental conditions that would be present. In addition to that, there was a discussion about the cost approach. Now, the 2-lane appraisal that we got in has conditioned a lot of folks to believe that the process for appraising real estate for residential real estate is a cost approach. And I disagree with that, and I continue to disagree with that because that is not the process. And as you go along with this, you'll begin to see why it's that way. So the cost approach, I ran through Marshall and Swift using the square footage of the property that you have, the condition, meaning the quality of the property, not necessarily condition, but the quality of property, because the quality levels for Marshall and Swift for excellent, good, very good, fair, and poor. Those are the conditions, and that sets the computer to determine which kind of materials it's going to include in the estimate and that sort of thing, and the kind of labor that will go with it. The final thing on this addendum was at the request of Ms. Sheena. She asked me not to come in because of the corporate. I put that in that appraisal report, just to be sure you knew that I had done what was supposed to have done. Next page. Keep going. Then there are some photographs of the property itself. And you can see the photographs from the street and from the rear. And there's a street view. These are the normal photographs that are included in the appraisal report. Next page. Next page. Now, what you're looking at are the comparables. These are brand new houses. And to my knowledge, the properties have not been lived in. There was an issue, there was a question about houses and that sort of stuff, and they indicated whether or not that they were going to be outside of the flood zone. In New Orleans, there is no outside of the flood zone. There is there is different levels of flood zone. Some areas have a higher propensity to flood than others, but that does not mean that we're all. When the levees broke in New Orleans, and I was here and I went through the city, most places had water, most places. So that indicates to me that the whole city could be in flood zone. The French Quarter, one of the few exceptions, is because the French Quarter is on the levee. It runs across the levee of the city of New Orleans, and it did not receive any flood water. On Broad Street and on Shuffmanshire Highway, which are high levels, there wasn't any water sitting on those streets. However, flood zone is a common thing in the city of New Orleans. We're surrounded by levees to keep the water out, but it also keeps the water in if the pumps don't work. So we're all subject to that.
Mr. Thorne,
Next, let me
one
finish.
question.
Go ahead.
Out all of these pictures that you showed to us, that you've taken, all of them are located in Pontchartrain Park. One on New York Street, one on Campus Boulevard, and one on St. Ferdinand. My question is, out of all these houses, I know there is one house in Pontchartrain Park that's brick that you could have taken an example of. Can you tell me why not give us an example of a brick home?
Brick homes that's a veneer, that's an outside veneer on the property itself. If the house is built, all houses are built, mostly single families, are built on wood frame. It's a frame. You have 2x4s framing the house up and around. And then on the outside of that 2x4, they put a weather board of sort. And then they put a weather strip, a weather barrier on the outside of it. And then they put either brick, or they could put wood siding, or they could put a masonry veneer on the other side of it. In terms of what it does, it literally not makes a big difference as to the value or the cost of the house.
Okay, not true, but I'm gonna take that. Go ahead.
If I could just do a quick interjection. This is
And
super
let me
quick.
finish answering your question, and I would appreciate if you give me that chance too.
Oh, you can
Finish answering the
answer.
question.
You can answer.
So let's talk about the houses in Gentilly Woods and Pontchartrain. And one of those houses, I believe, is in Gentilly Woods. I think St. Ferdinand is in Gentilly Woods. If it's not, then I'm pretty sure it is. But the ones are in Pontchartrain Park. So these are brand new houses. These houses have no depreciation, no obsolescence, and they are there. One of the requirements for selecting comparables is that you try to find them within a reasonable time period for which the appraisal is being done. So I couldn't just walk out and look at any brick house or any house and put it in my appraisal report. I would like to. The rules that have been set forth is that the sale has to have taken place within a year. And if you look at that appraisal report, all of the comparables in there were the sales took place within a year of the appraisal date of this property. Now, that is not to say that there are not brick houses out there, but if they weren't using this appraisal, because I didn't find a sale of those houses. What I have, and I found tons of sales throughout. In today's construction, brick houses are sometimes associated with a house on a slab when you build it on the ground. And fewer people are building houses on slabs because of flood mitigation. They're raising them above. And everybody building a house today generally have to get a survey and have to get a permit from the city of New Orleans in order to build. And the elevation of that floor, wherever the floor is, must meet with the requirements of plans and permits and plans for the city of New Orleans. That's why it's that way. Yes, sir.
Madam Chair, I know you're being very comprehensive. I just want to understand, and maybe I'll direct the question clearly. I have in front of me the letter, I think, that was delivered. So on this appraisal that you're discussing, the offer am I understanding $358,000?
That's correct.
And is that, and I guess to the initial question, so the $358,000 was for this house, and that's inclusive of the property, the land, everything of the sort, not the moving expenses that you highlighted, but also, this is my own lack of knowledge relative to this process.
Okay.
So you have a square footage associated with that house. if I was to simplistically divide that by 358,000, would that derive the baseline for any of the other houses that were either larger or smaller, or is that just overly simplistic?
Well, it's overly simplistic.
Okay.
So let me walk you through that. The larger the house, it will yield and throw off a lower dollar per square foot. In other words, when you go to the store and you buy in bulk, you can get more for less per item. If you buy one, you might pay $2. If you buy 10, you might pay $1. And in constructing property, it works pretty much the same way. If I have to go down and buy all the material to build a house, if I'm buying it from one or two places, the more I buy from them, the more of a discount that they're going to give me. So it does work its way down. Now, the components of that is two parts. There is the land associated with the property, and then there is the building itself. And of course, to affirm that I had a feel for what land value was, I have looked at literally thousands of land sales and land listings throughout the city of New Orleans. To give you an example, Nora has a database of 1,000 lots that it has for sale, 1,000 of them. Then there's another listing of hundreds and thousands of lots that have been bought by developers, and they've built houses on them and replaced houses. So all that information is available. Then on the issue of the houses themselves, I have looked at literally hundreds and hundreds of houses throughout the city and in areas. I had to meet the requirement of unimpaired, and I had to meet the definition of it. And so I chose where best met the definition of unimpaired as it relates to Gordon Plaza.
I have a question.
Hang on one second, Ludwina, because I've been waiting on a question real quick, and then I'm going to get to you. So you talked about the comparable neighborhoods that you looked at as Pontchartrain Park, Gentilly Woods. Why not Gentilly Terrace? Because in Gentilly Terrace, you have, much higher property values there. I know we want to take the subjectivity out of it, but picking and choosing certain neighborhoods, I think people feel like that's being very then subjective.
Well, in Gentilly Terrace, there is a difference in land value in Gentilly Terrace than it is than it would be in a similar neighborhood for Gordon Plaza. And I did look at Gentilly Terrace. I looked at the houses that were built in Gentilly Terrace, and there are comparable properties in Gentilly Terrace, which is across the railroad track from where the place is, and it's the same price. I chose the neighborhoods because I was being consistent with my approach to the property. If I found that there was a difference and that it was going to make a difference in terms of how I looked at it, I would have considered or included them, but I did not. I included, and for the record, most comparables that are used are brand new. They've never been lived in.
Ms. Hurst, you had a question?
Yes, my question was, Mr. Thorne, with the appraisal, because Mr. Montana just mentioned land, was land included in that appraisal that you did?
Yes, ma'am. When you buy a house, you buy both the lot and the improvements on the site.
Okay, I'm aware of that. I didn't see that on the appraisal. That's why I'm asking.
No, ma'am, I did not separate it. No, that's not a
Okay,
separated.
but that was my question, because I thought on appraisals that is separated, and you usually see the value of the land on there.
Doesn't have to be separated, ma'am. The sale
It
that I
doesn't?
use,
Okay,
the sale that I used included the entire cost from the contractor to the purchaser. And that included the land and the improvements that are on top of it.
so how would anyone know that you had included the land if it's not specified on the appraisal?
Because they didn't sell the house separate from the land.
Yes, they did.
Yes, they
Oh,
did,
yes, they
and it's
did.
it's on my
They did.
papers.
They did.
So, yes, and you said
No.
you said you had been in Machina's house years ago. That's how you could tell the inside of it, which is quite interesting to me. So therefore, you would know when you looked at those appraisals where your name appeared in the 90s and 80s and 90s, that is on those appraisals, the land and property separately. It's indicated on there.
Well,
And that's why I'm.
let me make it very clear to you what the land value is in Gordon Plaza, or not Gordon Plaza, but the land value that would in an unimpaired neighborhood for Gordon Plaza.
It's
And that
zero.
number is $28,000. That's the number. Unimpaired, when you look at Gordon Plaza and you look at unimpaired sites, that is the land value.
So we just have a few quick things.
Sure.
Okay. So I thank, I'm grateful, Mr. Montano, for your interest in this, because you have, all of you have some of the same questions we have. And so that's why I feel it's really important that this be reviewed so that a conscious decision can be made about next steps forward, because a few things. Number one, in an effort not to debate today, we are fully aware that people have different insurance fees that they pay, because some people are considered to be in a flood zone and some people are considered to be outside of a flood zone, even in Orleans Parish. We would definitely not equate that understanding to one connected to levees breaking, because even somebody in a non-flood zone might have experienced flooding when a levee breaks. We understand we're in New Orleans, so that's that. The second thing is, I think that it's really important to not just brush over this brick conversation, because we understand that there's a difference between a brick veneer and a brick home. The residents of Gordon Plaza live in brick homes, real bricks, not plastic bricks, real bricks. And we understand that there's a dollar amount associated with that. Anywhere between 6 and 7% increase on the dollar amount, and up to 10, depending on who is doing the appraisal. We also understand that when it comes to this idea of the appraisal in the context of this moment, when we look at what we're talking about in terms of the neighborhoods, Maxwell from Fair Housing came here after hearing Pontchartrain Park being named multiple times in this meeting by saying, the neighborhood you choose, and I want you just to be aware of this, Mr. Montano, considering that can be the difference between $100,000 for people. Because when we're talking about choosing to acknowledge the land or not, people understand that if you're choosing unimpaired land in another neighborhood, and we thank you for that, Mr. Thorne, but the neighborhood you choose matters. And the only reason that the residents of Gordon Plaza are making a distinction between the house and the land is because that's how it was sold to them. They were charged for the house separately than they were charged for the land. So there should be something on that. This is like the salmonella fish syndrome, fish sandwich. If you went to a business and purchased a sandwich and ate half of it and realized there was salmonella in there, what you supposed to do? Just walk away and be like, I'm cool on that? No, you paid for it. So with the understanding that we're talking about unimpaired, it should also be unimpaired in a non-flood zone. Last question, can we just ask collectively how the appraisal report form was selected? Why that form?
Mr. Thorne, I think that's a question of you. Is that a particular form that you use?
You're not listening.
Oh, I could have written a narrative report, which could have been 30, 40 pages. I could have used other forms, but this one is the most appropriate one because it does exactly what we're all looking for. It goes directly to the meat of it, and that is, what is the process for appraising residential single-family houses? And that is a direct comparison approach, and that's what the form does.
Okay, I just want to name, because I could be wrong on this, so I'm asking for your correction, actually, because I'm not an expert at appraisal. You are. So I just wanted to name, is that not a Fannie Mae form?
Yeah, I guess Fannie Mae uses. Lots of people use the form to appraise real estate. So it's not owned by anybody. It's the forms that are packaged into the software when you buy the software to do appraisals.
May I ask you, Angela, why would that be a problem if it's a Fannie?
Well, I just, when I think about any current day form that's not the Fannie Mae form 2022 versus 1997, I just don't know if that brings up a difference or not. I wouldn't not know.
It is no difference, ma'am.
Okay.
Mr. Thorne, may I ask if he would be able to continue to the end on his appraisal? Or are those your notes? That's it? You're there? Okay, that's fine.
I'm basically, there's some other parts in the appraisal report, and I was trying to deal with the issue of personal stuff. And I certainly would like to know from the property owner if I used something in this report that was personal that I should not have.
I did not understand why my mother and father, and I guess I just didn't understand why you had to go into deep of who owned the home when it's my home. My name is on so that's what I didn't understand. And the fact that, as Ms. Angela stated before, everyone else got this appraisal before I did. So it had my mother, my father, my tax form, my tax papers. It had everything other than, I just thought it would be everything regarding the home and the appraisal itself.
But one of the requirements for me to do the appraisal is to identify the property. So a copy of the title, which is recorded across the street in the courthouse, is where I start from. And I collect that title, and that title is made a part of my appraisal report. And the fact that the property was owned by your parents before you is a part of that process. It's just, and it's public record. And by the way, it's also available on the assessor's database, where if you put in your address and go in and look for it, you'll see the same thing on that record.
No, the public part, I mean, like public record, I get it. For you to get, I get it. I know you had the capabilities, but to send it out, that was my concern before I even got it.
No, it's a part of.
I didn't know it was going to be part of the package.
Well, yeah, I understand what you're saying, but it is a part of the package. It's what I have to submit when I submit the appraisal. It authenticates the appraisal.
So just out of curiosity, going back to this form that was used, does that in any way, shape, or form impact the form that was used? Because, and you're helping us to understand, because that Fannie Mae form, wouldn't it be used for lending purposes only?
It's used for appraisal purposes.
For lending.
It's used for appraisal purposes.
Okay, you're just helping us to understand.
The outcome of an appraisal is going to be the outcome of appraisal. The process of which you go through is clearly laid out in that particular form, and it achieves objectively the outcome, which is the value.
Okay, we're only asking, we're asking questions legitimately, trying to understand.
I understand. I have no
Because
problem.
at the top of the form, you got to know it makes a resident nervous, because at the top of a form, it has Machina's name as borrower and Cher Garner as lender. And we just didn't understand that, because a lot of these forms are often used to engage with banks. And we understand that there's more than one kind of form that can be used. And so that's why the sample became so important, because we really wanted to make sure that the residents have full understanding about the process and transparency. And so we thank you, Mr. Thorne, because this is helpful. At the end of the day, we want to make sure that all those things are considered so the residents can make a determination. So this is helpful.
Angela, can we talk about next steps for what we expect for the next meeting, and also
Yes.
come up with a date?
So between now and then, the residents, they understand that they have lots more questions, because of course we are not experts in appraisal processes. And so they will have
Set of
a
questions?
state, yes, they will have those questions hopefully answered by the time we come back to the next meeting with a review. And so with that being said, when we come back, we would really like, and if there's something that has to happen between now and then.
You know what I think would be really helpful?
Mhm.
Can you, by, early sometime next week, send in writing these questions so that there
Well,
is,
the questions that we have, yeah, we can send them.
because there
Absolutely,
could,
yes.
because there could be
The
some
answer to that
additional
is
ones.
yes.
Yeah,
Yes, the
And
answer to that is
that
yes.
would be great. And then, so like, can we say by Tuesday? Would that be?
Well, that's
sufficient
going to be
time?
dependent on the person who will review it. So what I can assure you is, as soon as those questions are generated, we'll be happy to share.
Okay,
Yeah.
because the reason why I'm saying this is because I want those questions in writing so that everyone's clear about what's
Mhm.
being asked. And then I want to be able to meet before we start our budget hearings, which
Yes.
start November 1, as you know, those go
Yeah.
all day long. And so I'm looking at actually, and I know everyone's super busy on Halloween, but I wanted to actually set the meeting for roughly with when Mr. Montano is available.
Yes,
And he's
please.
available at 1 o'clock on the 31st.
Yes.
And so if that works for everyone,
Hold on, Ms. Ladwina, does that work for you? That's a
1 o'clock
Monday.
on the
1
31st,
o'clock, yeah.
It does work?
yeah.
At what time? 1 o'clock on?
1 o'clock on the 31st, and Mr. Montano is available at that time. So we're set the meeting then.
We're coming, that's trick or treat day. We're not coming for tricks. We're not coming for tricks that day.
Well put, well put. Okay, so just so we're all clear, we'll be getting some questions in writing early next week, and we will be meeting again to get the questions that we receive in writing answered for the 31st, if not sooner, at 1 o'clock on the 31st. Mr. Thorns? Go
Yes, ma'am. On the issue of, she said that she wanted to have the appraisal reviewed, and that's perfectly fine with me. However, reviews need to be in writing, and the person needs to submit the review. So if they're going to review the appraisal, submit the entire review of the appraisal to you and me, so that I'll have the opportunity to have read it and understood what the review is about before we go forward.
Okay, that's noted.
Can I just ask
Go
one?
ahead, Mr. Montano.
It maybe be a Denisha or whoever her representative question is, transactionally, hypothetically, and I'm not leaning one, I just want to understand the process better. With this appraisal now as an offer, could said property owner accept the offer? We then would be required to provide him or her of those funds, and then we have to discuss, navigate the timeline for departure of that resident. Is that the sequence here? Transactionally, I'm not talking all the other pieces associated with it, but if that was the case, is that something that could happen to an interested seller? Or did I totally butcher that? You can come to the podium.
And Corwin, I have an additional question after that too about this letter.
Mhm.
I guess I'll try to be more concise. If this was an offer that was amenable to said property owner, what would be the next step? And is there anything that prohibits that next step from happening?
As far as the law department's concerned, the offer that was conveyed to the property owner can be accepted. That would cause a closing to be set. Of course, there's gonna be title research that needs to be done prior to that. And then there's gonna be a traditional closing where the property owner comes and signs the paperwork. In this case, I believe the mayor is going to have to sign off on these contracts. So what we'll probably end up doing is facilitate either the mayor to sign before, so that she doesn't have to actually go to the closing. But yes, to answer your question, my understanding is the funds are in escrow.
Correct.
We have a title company to do these closings. So that's an update from the last meeting that it's in an escrow account now? I want to be clear because we were informed that it was not in an escrow account.
I could be mistaken.
Separate
It's like in a
account. It's just
separate
a
account.
term,
Yeah.
semantics.
So here's my question. So Machina was kind enough to use her property as what we reference as a sample property so that we could get an understanding of really the methodology around the appraisal and how appraisals would work. She has now a 30-day time limit to accept this. I don't think that's fair. Her properties to really educate the rest of us as to how this property will work. I want you to contact Chair Gardner and have this 30-day fair approach to this process.
Thank you.
And look, set a parameter for closing a deal. Of course, the appraisal has been done and the city understands, or at least the law department understands that there are still some questions here.
And like, I
so
get
the
that.
offer is not going to disappear, but we
Well,
just,
that's what it says.
well, of course, but
Well, of course, and that's what it says.
well, I'm
So-
saying for
So
the
if I'm a resident and I'm reading this says like this offer goes away
Yes.
if you don't respond in 30 days. So these are letters going out from a law firm to the residents. So what I'm asking you to do and to put in writing is a new letter to Machina, making sure that this 30-day time period is eliminated for her.
can I add just a little
Sure,
bit
go
to
ahead.
that? Assuming this is all moving in the right direction, that's the premise of it and the idea, to the point where I don't feel like, I understand the pro forma, it has to have some parameters, like it, I understand that unique situation for that offer. But the other part I really want us to think more thoughtfully through is a hypothetical. If I'm an owner, but I have a renter in the facility, as an owner, I decide to sell that property, which would then potentially displace a renter. I want to make sure we're being thoughtful about the timeline for someone to actually move from those particular houses so that we can be, I guess what I'm trying to
Which
think of
goes to the
problems.
point too, why we really need to work out a component piece on, relocation grants.
And we've been
on
ready
how
to have that
piece-
conversation for some time. I want to just say thank you, Mr. Montano, for asking the question. This is why I know you think we hound you about coming to these meetings, but this is why we ask you to be present, because the things that people think we're just saying that's just out of the air, we're being antagonistic, it's because the process is antagonistic. And so what we're saying to you is, that's why Machina couldn't, if Machina wanted to take the offer today, she could never do so, because she would not be sure, and you have the evidence of it now, that even if she accepted the offer today, how we know she's not going to get a letter tomorrow saying be out of your house in 30 days from now? We can't run that risk, and we will not run that risk.
Well, I won't speak for the finalized policy, but I will say from the city perspective, we understand that there needs to be absolute lead time to address these issues, specifically for those that aren't the actual property owners that may be, affected outside of that.
And this is good because we want to be super clear so nobody leaves here confused. The residents have continually moved with a sense of urgency because they do not want to be on the landfill. The issue is that we do not need people to be haphazard with their lives, because that's the antithesis of this, and that would be as harmful, if not worse.
I will just say this with regard to 30 days move in or telling you to get out of the property. A closing is going to be set, and that's going to be a negotiation between the property owner and the purchaser, the city of New Orleans. So to the extent that, for instance, Ms. Dedmond said that she wanted to close on December 31st or something, I mean, that's all can be set up to where there's not going to be where anybody gets
But once
forced out of the
again, she's
property.
just not, she's
We
not
can't
sure.
trust
The
that.
way that this reads is that, she has 30 days to accept this offer or the deal's dead. Like, that's what this letter says. And it, I mean, I get it that now you're saying that this isn't necessarily going to be the case, but this was sent by a law firm, and giving instructions to the homeowner. So I think that that's a problem, particularly since we're not even going to be meeting again to really discuss more on the appraisal process until the 31st. So, I mean, her clock is ticking right now on what she's going to do. And I just think that this time period that has been sent to her in writing needs to be rescinded. And it needs to be made clear to her that this 30-day time period is not applying to her, considering that she's the one who has volunteered herself to put her house up for this sample appraisal and to be the one to help us through this educational process as we move forward.
Exactly.
I appreciate that. I understand, or I believe that there is some
What's the problem?
issues with the city as far as closing this deal and moving forward with the purpose that the properties are being purchased for. And I don't know what time.
And I get that, but I will say this, I personally have never heard about any type of time period to accept that's supposed to be 30 days. I've never heard anything like that. Like, this
Neither
is,
have we.
it was only until, I heard about the letter today and saw the letter that there's even like, you only have 30 days to decide whether or not you're going to accept this offer or not. And I mean, let's just take it a step further. Let's say that, a homeowner receives an offer letter and they do want to, get maybe an additional type of opinion on an appraisal, to set up that whole process and figure out if this appraisal and this offer is best. I mean, just kind of the due diligence on that to give someone just 30 days is actually very, very, very tight.
I mean, I understand your concern, but traditionally speaking, when an offer is made to purchase a property, there is a sunset provision there. So
Madam Chair, would you like to suggest
That
it's
was
a
not an
sunset
offer.
period? For example,
No, I would
120
like to
days?
suggest that for this particular property, we rescind this 30 days.
Okay, that's fine for this one. But moving forward with additional offers, because additional appraisals have been done, Would we suggest 90 days, 120 days? No?
Oh,
Well, I will say this for the
I have
record,
one
an
more thing.
appraisal expires after a year. So I mean, we wouldn't want it to be longer than that.
Can I just try to
Here's
just
an-
one more
here's an appraisal.
comment?
Mr. Montano.
So I know this is, to me, this is I understand that it's concerning but I think from the administration perspective, our goal is to sell the property, provide the funding. I'm personally, I know the mayor wouldn't be personally affected by the 30 days or whatever it is with the anticipation to move the residents to a different place. I think that is more the
I
goal.
think,
and the
Mr.
objective.
Montano, what I'm saying is that on this particular property, when nobody knew about the 30 days, when no one knew that there would be this like 30-day acceptance periods of the offer, when we had, Miss Machina volunteer her property,
right, it was
she did not
correct.
know that she would have within 30 days to accept this offer. I think with having the knowledge moving forward, that once you have your property appraised, then you'll be getting an offer letter that potentially will give you 30 days. That's a different story than Ms. Sheena volunteering her property. And then all of a sudden, here's
Correct.
your 30-day notice that you have to accept or not, when she was really going to be kind of the educational sample. That's why I think her 30 days needs to be rescinded as we continue to work through this process, get through the meeting on the 31st, and then figure out the next steps from there.
Yeah, I don't disagree. And I'm not
Appreciate that.
a challenge. I think that I don't want you absolutely taking all the heat in the brunt. It sounds like there was a pro forma standard mishap between what a normal transactional for this issue would be. And this is a very unique situation that we have to be much more thoughtful about moving forward when we're having official correspondence. And now we are evolving, and I think we're addressing that. And I know the goal always maintains the initial of the movement of the properties, not necessarily the time parameters associated for accepting or not accepting those offers. So
So-
And we
hopefully that
want to
clarifies
just
that.
confirm that the residents are not of the mindset that they're trying to be there forever. They're
Right.
trying to go,
Right, that's
but
the whole
not with
point.
haphazardness.
That's the whole point.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Um,
this is the last thing, because I know this is one more thing, is that at the start of this process, this was why the residents asked before things were just announced, before things were declared, before things were mailed, that these Gordon Plaza Task Force meetings give an opportunity for the communication to happen proactively. Because whether it was intentional or not, it feels deceptive that an appraisal was sent over in electronic form, but that letter was not attached and not sent till last night. That creates anxiety,
Yeah,
which creates backlash,
Yeah.
and it's unnecessary.
yeah.
It wasn't even necessary for that to happen.
And I can respond to that. As far as the appraisal and the transmission of the appraisal, when we were here last time, it was asked of Mr. Thorne to perform this appraisal by a certain date. He did perform the appraisal. We shared it with Councilmember Moreno, who it was to share with the community, whoever.
Yeah, I shared with Ms. Amar and Ms. Rainey, the two board members I've been asked to send it to. And then I also send it to Lauren Godshall and to Cassius Pelias. Those are the people who I shared it with.
So as far as the law department sharing it with anyone, we've only shared it with the council. And we had Share Garner transmit correspondence to the property owner with an offer.
Do you see the pattern and trend that keeps emerging though? Because when these communications get sent, and I'm sorry, sir, what's your name again?
It's Corwin.
I'm sorry,
Corwin,
Corwin?
yes.
Corwin, I'm sorry, just to note is that the disconnect again, and we understand why, maybe we understand or don't understand why they're not in the room, neither here nor there, we're moving forward, is that process is what stops things. Whatever was gonna be sent over, that's a big ass deal, a 30-day window to make a decision. So those things should be open and transparent and not be, the last 2 times letters were sent out, Mr. Montano, was literally either the night before one of these meetings or while we were on our pathway over here. The delivery man was dropping it in the box while we were over here. That feels deceptive.
It is.
And I will say this too, is that the city making offers to purchase property is between the city and the property owner. So to the extent that there's no deception here, is the offers that were previously transmitted whereby members of the community that requested Mr. Thorns to appraise the property. And following that, I would assume that those property owners were expecting to receive an offer, as that's what we're here for. And so those letters were transmitted to the property.
That's understandable. So we're just saying any timelines that impact the residents of Gordon Plaza and decision-making in their lives need to be proactively communicated to them so that they can plan accordingly. Because some of those things in the name of transparency, which was the original agreement to keep this moving forward, minimizes confusion, minimizes anxiety, and minimizes people from feeling dismissed. So we're not here to say whether someone was intentionally deceptive. We are here to say to course correct this, because that's how it lands on people, deceptive.
Let me ask, we talked about having the appraisal that I submitted reviewing. And my request is that it be reviewed by a certified real estate appraiser.
That will happen.
And that the
State of
information be
Louisiana.
provided with me timely enough if you expect me to be here for a meeting, so I can review what has been reviewed.
That's
and respond to
understandable.
it.
People, see, what happens is, this is good, Mr. Thorns, people like transparency when they are involved. And we are saying that the residents have only been asking for that level of transparency that you're asking since the beginning. So you're not, this is not about you. This is about this overall process. We thank you for your part. We're saying that we want that to be the case for the residents as
Ms.
well.
Hurst.
As a resident of Garden Plaza, and on behalf of the residents of Garden Plaza, first of all, thank you very much, Mr. Montana, for asking those questions. Thank you, Councilwoman Moreno, for asking that that deadline be removed. We had a meeting in the mayor's office, and I brought forth when we were offered an amount of money to move. I brought forth, if I didn't accept that amount of money, what would you do with me? Throw me out of my property? So a deadline to me as a resident is very discriminatory. It's very, you giving me an ultimatum. You got 30 days to accept this offer and then get the hell on out the property that I have worked for years to achieve. Would you, any one of you all sitting here in administration, want that to happen to you? Do you do it on to other properties that you're claiming? First of all, the property that you're purchasing, that the city is purchasing, is being used, it's going to be torn down brick by brick, and you talk down about the brick, but I can assure you, because somebody going to come and take them bricks and buy them at a very high rate. Then another thing, would you put a solar plant on that property? You're going to reap the benefits of that. You got $35 million sitting in the bank, collecting interest every day. Who's reaping the benefit of that? You're trying to penny pinch us because we're Black. And I, coming from the segregation era, accept it as discrimination. And I don't like it one bit. When I heard that Sheena got this letter, when I only heard today that she got this letter last night with the appraisal, I was very, very, very disturbed. So we have been on this long enough. We've been here for a whole year. And before that, but consistently for a year, we've been living on that property, and we are sick and tired. Yes, we want the process expedited, but we don't want to be treated like we animals and throw us out of. Do you want to be thrown out your house? Does Mayor Cantrell want to be thrown out her house? Hell no, I'm a senior citizen. I don't work too hard, and I'm not going to let anybody throw me out of my house. So thanks for asking for that to be removed. And we will talk about a timeline as far as moving once we get the amount of money that I need to move into a safe, healthy home of my choice without having a debt. Because I've already been, I don't want another mortgage. I'm too old for that, for one thing. I would like to live the rest of my life comfortable and peaceful. Right now, I am not peaceful, not one doggone day. Because I cannot do nothing to my property and I can't do anything. The holidays are coming up. Do I feel like doing anything for the holidays? Hell no. Because, and yes, I would like to have that to move rapidly in a right legal, treat me legally like you would treat a white person. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Ms. Hurst. Okay, so we have our action items and we have a meeting set for the 31st at 1 o'clock. Okay, all right, thank you all so much. We're adjourned.
And it's